Hello and welcome to the 84 Million podcast. Today's a special day in the Litecoin ecosystem. We're celebrating our third halving, which I'd like to discuss today with our guest, who we can see is Shan. Let me do a quick introduction here for Shan. I hope it does justice. What do we say about him? He's a juggernaut of Litecoin Twitter, now called X, publishing under Master BTC LTC. He's an author, public speaker, 2022 Litecoin Summit panelist. I'm going to call him an inventor because he created the crypto keys. He's a data scientist, a retired engineer who, quote, works full-time on Litecoin. I'd say as a volunteer to a degree. Shan also publishes the indispensable Look into Litecoin.com, a publication I read regularly and 84 million highly recommends. He's also responsible for a number of Litecoin trading models, which I hope to discuss later in the show. So Shan, welcome to the show. And what did I miss?
Man, that was better than I could have done. I appreciate it, Kyle. Thank you.
No problem.
What I will say though is that that it's finally exciting to see we have a first podcast for Litecoin.
Indeed, we've had spaces for a while from Grant, and I know you and I were in conversations about this, so it's nice to have you seated here in the room, as we'd kind of had some discussions privately about starting something like this. Now, granted, you're not affiliated with 84 million, but you're very
not yet.
Not yet, but I consider you an advisor of sorts, or just a very important encouragement in the space. You're activating lots of people in lots of areas of the internet. So I've enjoyed our relationship. I consider you a friend, even though we've never formally met. And we'll get into your personality. I think you're a strong one in the space. So either way, let's go into the halving. We'll just jump right into it. So for those who may not be familiar with the Litecoin halving, it happened today. Per this recording, it's August 2nd. It happened on the Litecoin network. It's Litecoin's third halving. Halvings happen roughly every 4 years, or after every 840,000 blocks are mined. It happened around 10:16 this morning, Texas or Central Time, at block 2520000. It's a programmed deflationary monetary event where block rewards for miners are halved, hence the name halving. The first block reward took rewards from 50 to 25, the second from 25 to 12.5, where we were as of this morning. And the third reduction now has taken rewards down to 6.25 per block. Halvings occur or will occur in perpetuity until all 84 million coins are mined. I want to see at 2142, something like this in the future.
That's correct.
I think this is a reasonable and simple way to view it. Tell me more about the halving.
Yeah. So the third halving was today. And so the importance of the halving for Bitcoin and Litecoin, they both have the same halving schedule. And what's great about those two networks in particular, they both have like a deflationary schedule, right? So every 4 years, the amount of Litecoin or Bitcoin, both of those networks have the same, is reduced in half. It's actually pretty significant every 4 years. But the nice thing is over those 4 years, there's time for the network to adopt, to reach adoption, to start to see more transactions on the network. And eventually, you're going to have to see a fee market take over. And you're kind of already seeing that take place and realize this is going to take a while, right? We're still pretty early. There's going to be lots of halvings until 2142. But the great thing about Litecoin's halvings versus Bitcoin is that with Litecoin, it's merged mined with Dogecoin. We'll get into that a little bit later, but there's some benefits, particularly today. Litecoin's block rewards were like 30% of miner revenue. The remaining portion was Dogecoin. Okay, so Dogecoin is actually helping fund the security of both those networks.
Dogecoin, once upon a time, did have halvings, and they were pretty rapid. That helped almost destroy them. And then they merged with Litecoin. So tell me about the relationship of Litecoin and Dogecoin. Are they both halving, or is just Litecoin halving?
Yeah, that's a good point. So you got to realize that all these networks are kind of an experimentation. And so Bitcoin started with the 4-year halvings, and Litecoin followed suit with the same halving schedule every 4 years, just offset by like 30 months, I think, is what it is. Actually, probably, yeah, I think it's about 30 months because Bitcoin's halving is next May. So Dogecoin is a fork of Litecoin, a fork of Lucky Coin, which is a fork of Litecoin. Um, but its halving schedule was tweaked a little bit, so it was a little bit faster. I think it only took like a year or two for Dogecoin, the block rewards to be completely gone, right?
So they use them all.
To use them all, yeah. And
Wow.
so at that point, the mechanism for miners to mine that network would have been fees. And we all know you were super early 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? These networks just weren't being used as much. And at that point, miners just weren't going to mine it. And so you could see, if you understand blockchains, it's really important to be dominant in the blockchain, and you want to make sure that you have like dominance. If you have less than like 51% of the hash rate, you could get attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dogecoin they were facing that. And the really cool story about it was that Charlie Lee, of course, he kind of proposed to the Dogecoin community, hey, why don't you guys consider something called merge mining? And I think actually Satoshi or even Hal Finney proposed merge mining early on. And Namecoin, I think, was one of
Namecoin. Hmm.
the first merged mine coins with Bitcoin. Um, and so you could argue, or you could just say that Litecoin saved Dogecoin. And I think we're still going to like learn the benefits of that, and we'll talk more about it in a little bit later. But I think it's one reason why Elon loves Dogecoin.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, Doge is thinking about the relationship that if you're a script miner or S script miner, you have the
Yeah,
option. You have the option to mine both. I don't think you need to. Like, I imagine if you just don't set up part of the, if you set it up for Litecoin but don't do your due diligence, set up a wallet or something for Doge, you probably can forsake the mining rewards. But you can mine both. I'm not a miner. I believe you have done some mining.
and
Um,
I have it, but it looks like looking at the script dominance. I think it's kind of all kind of an estimate, but if you look at Dogecoin and based on the difficulty adjustments, you can infer that it looks like the majority of people are mining both at the same time.
which is
Like,
excellent.
yeah, I
And
mean, you'd want to because they're both top 10 networks. Like
here,
you'd be
here.
throwing money away if you were just mining. But I do know that miners, some miners at least right now, they are selling their Dogecoin initially and converting it over to Litecoin, and they're holding the Litecoin.
Which is terrific. Very
Yeah,
good.
well, at times that can change.
Exactly, market conditions. But the interesting thing is, while the reward halved today on Litecoin, it did not have on Dogecoin. So you're earning
Correct.
less Litecoin due to its
Yeah.
deflationary schedule. Yet your Doge rewards are fixed, which is pretty nice,
Yeah.
and those will continue beyond the last halving. But
Yeah.
we'll pivot from that to the next. We'll move forward off of that, but we may return to it.
Let's do
So,
it.
seeing that this is a programmed event, what does this tell us about the monetary policy of Litecoin as a network? What it
Yeah.
values, why it exists, the difference between the predominant systems of the world.
Yeah. The amazing thing about this, you can just kind of break it down. It's just software, right? People want to like say this is some like make it bigger than it really is. I mean, it is pretty big, but it's just software ultimately. And Bitcoin software, Litecoin is software. But the cool part is that it's decentralized, and all the people that are running these networks are running the software. It all communicates essentially through the blockchain, and the blockchain is a encrypted, secure method of recording data. And that's kind of what Satoshi invented, was the computer science breakthrough, the Byzantine generals problem. And so all those computers are able to, no one can cheat the system, and it's all fair. And so it's just software, decentralized software. And what that shows is that this was created, Bitcoin in 2009, and then Litecoin in 2011. What it shows is that once that code was originally released, it's set in stone for the most part, right? Sure, you could hard fork it, but that original fork, that original source, is dominant. Okay, and the people and the two chains that are dominant for SHA-256, which is Bitcoin, and then you have one for with Litecoin with Script and Dogecoin. Those are dominant. And like I said, it's all an experiment. Those are the so you're looking at which experiments are winning. It's Bitcoin and it's Litecoin and Dogecoin because they're dominant in their networks, their mining hash algorithms, right? That's really important. And so what's great about the monetary policy is that once that code was set, you can audit, you can see it, and we just know that it's true, it's correct because it just happened today. And we all knew it was going to happen. We had 4 different websites all trying to predict the exact time. I think it happened a little bit earlier, and the reason it happened a little bit earlier was probably because there was an increase in hash rate, and the difficulty adjustment for Litecoin is every 3.5 days, and I think that happened like an hour or two after the halving, just by coincidence. So you could kind of run it, you could speed up the blocks a little bit if you started mining pretty quickly. And there was probably some incentives for some miners to get that block. That's a special block. There's only going to be so many of those blocks ever created. So it's kind of like a race to get that block.
Yeah, and it was full. Was it full? The gold block I was watching on Litecoin Space. At least it appeared visually on their platform as full, but it may not have been full. It was just gold.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
It was cool. It was a nice presentation.
I didn't know it was going to happen, so we were watching that. Charlie Lee was live, and I was watching that, and it turned gold. That block where the halving went to 6.25. I actually snuck in an inscription in that block,
that's pretty amazing. Yes.
So I jumped on the Liteverse and just uploaded a quick snapshot and it actually got into that block. It was kind of cool.
That is cool. That's very cool. It's an artifact and a piece of history. That's very cool. In terms of the halving, why should people care about it? Why do you care about it? We might be.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What's great about the halving? It's showing the Litecoin and like Bitcoin, they both have a halving schedule. They're both deflationary and they're moving towards a total finite amount. And why does that matter? It's in contrast. It's almost like a different economic model than like traditional finance or money printing fiat system where it's designed to have like be inflationary, right? So it's like the antithesis of that. It's like a gold or a silver, but realize the other cool part is that gold's inflation is like right around, I think, 2%, right? Maybe a little bit under.
Mm-hmm.
Litecoin's inflation rate, you can call it a deflation rate or inflation rate, whatever. It is now 1.8%.
So less than, yeah.
Yeah, less than, and it's actually equal to Bitcoin's right now, and it'll be equal to Bitcoin until May of next year, right? Until Bitcoin goes to like 0.9
halves, yeah.
And so it means that there's some scarcity to it, and that it's finite, and that's a pretty special characteristic for anything. And typically, things that have value are typically like hard to obtain. They're scarce, limited. They need to have some demand, though, obviously. And so that's one of the reasons why I like these assets. Even Dogecoin, it is inflationary, but inflationary to its own. It's better than the dollar, is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. And even Elon said that. So its inflation rate's like 3.9%, and then it's going to go down in the next 30 years. Like it'll be down around 1%, right? So at that point, it's kind of still insignificant. It's less than gold.
Yeah, I think it'll become very insignificant as the overall pool expands dramatically, and we're still on a fixed issuance, which I think on a cursory view a few years ago, because we all knew about Dogecoin. I mean, we still care about, but the story, I don't know if the story's changed. The perception's changed a lot the past few years, and I think for good reason. But initially I didn't like it that it wasn't capped, but I didn't realize that it's still rule based, even though it's not capped. And it's still non-arbitrary, even though it's not capped. And again, if you have the issuance fixed over time, the effect on the total supply is going to diminish. So I think Doge is very interesting, and I think it's how did Charlie say? It's the the dog guarding the house. You know, I like that we can use that analogy. Um, so is it the happening or the having?
It's the having.
Because people have said the happening over the years.
Yeah,
That's actually one of the older ones. Nobody really says happening anymore.
yeah. There's people that still say that. I always say the having,
Yeah,
and there's a couple websites that say that also. But it's the same with like S script. Like it's supposed to be pronounced S script, but scripts is so much easier. It rolls off the tongue.
it is.
But we did get clarification from so it's a private individual who created the hashing algorithm for Litecoin, which is pretty cool. His name is Colin Percival.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit different than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin SHA-256 was invented by the NSA.
Tell us more. We can take some space on this. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know a lot about the distinctions of the algorithms. I just know Litecoin is king of script with Doge, and then
we'll talk
Bitcoin.
about that a little more, from what I know, at least. So SHA-256 is the hashing algorithm for Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's other networks that share that because they've been a direct hard fork of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin
they still use
Cash,
that,
etc. All the Bitcoin variants. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about those other networks that have minority, and you have to realize that we will be moving towards a fee based security. And as the rewards reduce on Bitcoin Cash, for example, the same as Bitcoin, over time, like what's the incentive for a miner to mine those networks?
Mm-hmm.
There has to be fees, and the fee structure for Bitcoin Cash has always been like really low fee, like a Litecoin, or really low fees. But at some point that may not be, even today, it's probably not sustainable, but it's going to get potentially worse in the future when it's all fee based. Miners will have really no incentive to move over towards Bitcoin Cash. And the cool part about that with Dogecoin and Litecoin is that miners, let's say miners didn't want to mine Litecoin, which I don't think they're going. I mean, I don't think they would ever do that. But let's say they didn't want to. They would just mine Dogecoin. But if you're going to mine Dogecoin, you might as well mine Litecoin. So you're going to get that security both ways. Likewise, if no one's really using Dogecoin for a lot of years, it was like people were using that network less. Mm-hmm. Litecoin kind of carried the water for Dogecoin, right? So you kind of get this mutual benefit of both of those. And then back to the actual S script versus SHA-256. So with S script, it was invented by Colin Percival. You can look all this up, and it's a little bit different algorithm. It's more like a memory intensive algorithm. I was going
to say that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what that means I don't know what causes that, but the way the hashing of that particular algorithm, it's more memory intensive. Okay. Now how does that affect mining equipment? So a lot of people don't know that Bitcoin uses a different miner, like a physically different mining device compared to a Litecoin and Dogecoin miner. Like they're separate, they're different. So if you walked into a data center or a mining center, you would see Bitcoin miners and you would see Litecoin miners, right? You're not going to see one miner doing both. They're not switching in between two networks.
Which is important because initially Litecoin used the alternate algorithm so that it would always be impossible forevermore to ever attack the other chain. Correct. Again, hand in hand, handshaking, walking together, not competing, as we say.
Yeah, exactly. And as an engineer, that's really important. It's very important. And actually, if you support Bitcoin, you should support Litecoin because they're both, it's both versions of Bitcoin. Right? It's an open source project. They're both dominant in their hashing algorithms, and you want redundancy. In our financial system, it would be absolutely ridiculous to run on one, like a Bitcoin standard. Sure, maybe like a Bitcoin-like standard or a Nakamoto standard, but making claims that it's Bitcoin only and being a Bitcoin maximalism is ridiculous.
I would agree.
When you have a network like Litecoin, yeah, and we could we probably will go down that, but we can argue that Litecoin actually is maybe a better version of Bitcoin in some ways, particularly because of the block times, maybe the hashing algorithm, and also the merge mining with Dogecoin. Those could be some potential benefits of how Litecoin is a better Bitcoin.
Not to mention MWeb.
Yeah. So let's talk about MWeb. I found something out kind of interesting. Indigo
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Hey, have you thought of this?" And and I'll kind of go down a little bit of rabbit hole here.
Please do.
Yeah. Okay. So Mimblewimble, the paper was anonymously created.
Indeed, yes.
The Bitcoin white paper was anonymously created. They both appeared. The Bitcoin white paper obviously was a bigger breakthrough than Mimblewimble,
Mm-hmm.
but nonetheless, it was also anonymous. Okay, and I don't know if it's the same person, but it could be. In the Mimblewimble, the name Mimblewimble comes from what, Harry Potter?
Harry Potter, tongue tying curse, yes.
It's a tongue tying curse, and the author, the anonymous name, was Tom Elvis Judicer.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that is the name of the. And didn't read the books or watch the movies, but it's like it's like one of the bad characters who casts a spell. That's his name. In that name, in the French version of his name, it says like I am Moldor or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's some fun stuff with that. Anyways, in one of the movies, that character fights the other like wizard, and in his name is Percival.
Mm-hmm.
It's Percival something, and Percival, and you have Percival is S script, Colin Percival, and you have Percival from the. So like, it's just kind of fascinating. Is it possible that maybe that person anonymously created that technology? And then kind of dropped a subtle hint, like maybe this is meant to be on Litecoin,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe eventually Bitcoin down the road. But so Litecoin implemented Mimblewimble, which has script, and then you kind of have the both Percivals. And I made a cool meme about it. I put it online. I don't know if anybody really gets it, but it's just fun to think about, right?
It's
Just
interesting lore and
yeah,
enough questions to keep you wondering, but also it seems like some things have aligned intelligently with these
sure.
descriptors and associations.
Yeah, because Percival is a unique like name, right?
Mm-hmm. Not a common
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
so what are we saying? Satoshi is Percival?
No, no, no. I just potentially that maybe the anonymous person was thinking of Litecoin script
Okay,
and
okay.
Percival.
Well, I know that there's been allegations, regarding Satoshi abandoning Bitcoin, as we say, and he sits on his pile. Nobody knows where he is. He went on to move on to other things, and then of
Yeah,
course we have Satoshi Light, who is visible in the public sphere.
yeah.
Uh, and you've made comments that it might be the same person. Are you serious? Are you just having fun? Maybe both. Is What is this experiment that
Yeah, see,
Satoshi
so
Light might have been Satoshi?
it's definitely possible. But talking with Charlie about it, if Charlie was Satoshi, I think he would just have already have announced it.
Mm-hmm.
And and one of the reasons I think he probably already would have is because of Craig Wright, right? So Craig Wright, if you don't know, he's like an he's a he's a person who's claimed to be Satoshi. Okay, and he's like done these frivolous lawsuits, and he's lost every single one. He just doesn't seem like a very good human being. If Charlie was Satoshi, he would sign the Genesis block, and he would say, "I'm Satoshi. Craig Wright isn't." That's what he would do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in knowing Charlie, that's what he would do. The other thing is like if it was Charlie, why would he would just take the money and go sit on an island, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why
What if
just
Satoshi moves? What
yeah,
happens to that volume of Bitcoin when it moves? Will it move?
I think it needs to move. In the cool thing about what Charlie's done with Litecoin is he showed that Litecoin is money,
Mm-hmm.
and you should be able to use it as money however you feel, as a store of value or a unit of account or a medium of exchange, and that's what he did. And he's also, by him selling his stash, he's also greatly decentralized Litecoin because, for example, like you're here,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're the voice of Litecoin. I'm a voice of Litecoin. There's several people that are voices of Litecoin, and that community has been stronger because he kind of set back.
Yeah.
He's not like a Vitalik, right?
Yeah.
Where
No,
everyone
not at all.
looks
Correct.
towards Vitalik to provide these answers for Ethereum. Um, you know, he still works on Litecoin. He still helps develop Litecoin. He provides a lot of um, wisdom when it comes to not only just Litecoin but Bitcoin and other proof of work networks, right? So he's like a respected figure in the space, and as somebody who should be highly thought of in my mind, and to me
I
he
would
is,
agree.
obviously. Yeah.
I agree. And yeah, we're grateful to have him. And it's interesting that we can actually, follow him on Twitter. I think we take it for granted. Again, he's one personality, but he knew how to code or mine the Genesis block like
Yep.
Satoshi.
Well, he had to figure it out. He said it was
Right.
difficult.
Satoshi
Yeah.
knew how to do it because he did it with Bitcoin, and Satoshi Light knew how to do it somehow, and he did it. So,
Well, I mean, he's a smart individual. I mean, he went to MIT. He worked at Google, right? I mean, he had some early companies that he worked at. Probably did some cool things there. I mean, he's definitely a special, gifted individual. And the biggest characteristic about him is that he's a very good, like, quiet, humble leader.
very much.
And some of the, and some of those characteristics obviously have led us to follow those. Find those same qualities. We're not perfect. A lot of us still have a lot of egos, but he doesn't have that. And he's like a normal person, right? Like he's like you and I. Obviously, everybody's for the most part pretty normal. He's very approachable and whatnot. But so I think it's really important for people to pay attention to that. And a lot of people, they might say like, "Oh, he sold his stash and he walked away from the project." Even if he did do that, it still wouldn't matter. But
It wouldn't.
he
I would
sold
agree.
the project, sold his stash, made it more decentralized, and he benefited off of that, which is great. And then
And the network survived despite it. I mean, it
yeah,
didn't harm
yeah.
anything.
And the cool part about it, I mean, is that the people who really use the network, like the network is surviving on its own.
Yes.
Right. So if it's not relying on one individual, the network is relying on individuals, and it has to be useful, right? So you're seeing Litecoin continually being adopted, right? So I mean, like it was the years ago, PayPal just added it, and then most recently, like BitPay, it actually surpassed Bitcoin.
I wanted to bring that up. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so you're just seeing network adoption on its own. One of the things that has been kind of like a little bit slower, but maybe it's actually a good thing, is that price has not followed value, right? And if you're still accumulating, you're still transitioning from maybe a fiat or a little bit of savings into these investing into these assets, it's actually probably beneficial that you could do that. Because if the price is ripped up to like 1,000 or 2 or even higher, like a 30,000 like Bitcoin, your share of the network will be a lot lower if it did that, and then it won't get into the hands of like more people, right? So more people like can afford this percentage of the network, which is like so let's compare it to this. So MicroStrategy, I made a graphic yesterday on this, and I was kind of shocked. So MicroStrategy owns $4.6 billion of Bitcoin. Litecoin's market cap is 6.8 billion. So it's like 70%. So
yeah.
So it just goes to show that how much smaller Litecoin's market cap, and
Yes.
if you were to compare like the benefits of the two networks, they're on par.
In fact, Litecoin handled ordinals a lot better than Bitcoin did.
Yeah, but there are some benefits of ordinals on Bitcoin because the block size is a little bit smaller. You might see maybe more high quality projects on Bitcoin because of that, right? It's got like what would you call that? Like this, like the upper scale or high price, luxury, maybe a luxury chain right now. Litecoin is more like duty. It's more utility. But here's the thing: Litecoin can be all that luxury in the future, right? It possibly could be.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I wanted to talk about BitPay and that as a money, Litecoin has realized that it is the cryptocurrency for payments. I recently reached out to E, who wrote the book, trying to get him to talk about it, but he's a little bit busy as of late and some transitioning in his own personal life. But
Yeah,
I hope to have him talk about the book because it's 5 years old this year. It's dated, but I told him the same thing. It's very much a staple. Litecoin, the cryptocurrency for payments, is by eCurrency Hodler, and
yeah,
it's been realized. We now actually have seen that the market, through the largest digital payments processor, has said Litecoin is number one.
yep,
Bitcoin is now, in that regard, number two. And again, I'm not here to diminish Bitcoin. I'm a Bitcoiner, but I'm not a maximalist. And that's where my frustration rises in saying it's a Bitcoin only world when it's like, no, no.
yeah.
Um, but
Multi-chain. Yeah,
yeah, and it will change in time because I think I had some kind of a little bit of tweeting lately regarding another tweet in the community, and there was a little bit of a pushback against it, saying that Bitcoin is for everyone. Because again, I get it; it's divisible to the eighth decimal point. Theoretically, yes, everyone can have a piece of Bitcoin, but to operate on chain with transaction limitations, it's not going to happen. Um, it's just not going to happen. So Bitcoin is a part of the world, but I don't see it independently running the world, at least on chain. I mean, if you have multiple top layers, but then you're abandoning the sole purpose of being
yeah.
on a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, right? So I
Well,
don't.
and that's a good point. And sure, we could all go Bitcoin only. Yeah, we could, and we could all layer on top of it. But when you already have a network that's dominant, redundant, and so well designed as Litecoin, why wouldn't you just use that, right? And so you would. And people love choice. They love competition, um, and people love value, right? So there's a lot of value in Litecoin. Sure, if Litecoin's price like rips and gets maybe overvalued, maybe you would look at other chains as like a. And the reason I say that is because I'm 100% invested in Litecoin, right? I've owned Ethereum, I've owned Bitcoin, I've owned other assets,
Mhm.
I've owned Dogecoin, but I mainly invest as a value investor, finding assets that are extremely undervalued, that have huge upside, and for me, that's Litecoin. And so to say that it's Bitcoin only is and even if you understand blockchains, which most people don't really think about that stuff, but I put together a graphic showing Litecoin in the middle. You have Dogecoin and Bitcoin, and so the reason why Litecoin's fees are so low is because it has more throughput. Okay, it's just really that simple. Bitcoin could have that too, but then you might start competing with other networks. So it's all an open experiment, and Litecoin's throughput is around, let's just say it's around 20 megabytes every 10 minutes. Bitcoin's at 4 megabytes every 10 minutes, and Dogecoin is 10 megabytes for
Mm.
10 minutes. Okay. And so some people are like, oh, Dogecoin has the lowest fees, the lowest throughput. That's not true. Today it does not. Litecoin does. And then the other thing about it is that when you start comparing, like Bitcoin and Litecoin and Dogecoin, those three together, those three chains also have different features that have been added over time. And we can first start with like SegWit. So SegWit was a block size increase. Litecoin added it first, then Bitcoin. So it's a scaling block size increase. So Bitcoin and Litecoin both have that. Dogecoin does not have that, right? And it still has the 10 megabytes for 10 minutes because it's 1 megabyte for every minute, and the blockchains are 1 minute for Dogecoin. And then you start looking at so SegWit enabled Lightning Network, which Litecoin initially tested first and has had Litecoin Lightning Network, but
Correct.
it's not necessarily needed right now. So Bitcoin, it's needed on Bitcoin, and and then you have MWeb, which only Litecoin has. And that also is a block size increase. It also has pretty cool scaling features through cut through and coin joins essentially. Dogecoin doesn't have that. So you kind of, if you're just like step back from price or what market cap, whatever, and you looked at the engineering fundamentals of those three chains, Litecoin has the best tech.
Yeah, definitely.
It just does,
yeah.
right? So one of the things about blockchains though is like, well, can you just increase the throughput? Why don't you just 10x it? Then you start, there's the blockchain dilemma, right? So what happens is you got to stay still somewhat decentralized, because the decentralization is critical in ensuring the code doesn't change like easily, right? It's going to take like many people to change a code or hard fork or whatever, right, to get consensus. And so Litecoin's done a really good job of balancing that block size to the usage. And what I mean by that, you can actually go look, because the total block size of Litecoin is 120 gigabytes to download on your computer.
Yep.
Bitcoin's like, I think almost 500.
Yeah,
actually, it's
huge.
probably at 500 today. And Dogecoin's at like 74, 75. And so you could see Litecoin could 4x in the amount of data on chain and still be under Bitcoin, right? And so those are some of the things that you have to just pay attention to. And I think that Litecoin, the community, the development has done a really good job of paying attention to that. And of course, the block size can increase over time because, you know, hardware, hard drives, the storage increases, right? Yeah. I mean, we know that. We grew up, we've seen this stuff like just get crazy. I think my first computer was like under 5 megabytes or something stupid, right? Just now we're like 5 terabytes.
Yeah.
Or higher.
Pardon while I drink my kombucha. I want to talk about price speculation. You're very forward in terms of publishing charts where you see things going or potentials, right? Nobody knows the future. It would be an impossibility, and I wouldn't believe you if you claimed it. However, you can use certain intelligences that you have to predict things and model things out and everything else. Some people really, really rail on talking about price in the Litecoin community and probably other communities, but we're going to talk about Litecoin. Yeah, they hate it. Don't talk about it. It's irrelevant. You know, it's a perpetual disappointment if something that is said doesn't happen. I'm not actually of that opinion, because I think you're energizing things with language and engagement. And if there is no discussion, nothing ever will happen. There is no vision. Yes, you can be wrong and it can be incorrect, but I think there's a role in speculation, and I think there's a role of the speculator. Of course, again, nothing is going to be perfect, especially with a decentralized network. You can't control it. It's not gameable. So you're very outspoken about price predictions. You've said your daily reminder, Litecoin is going to 2,000, then 30,000. Yep. So where are you basing these? I know that was generally from an interpretation of a Charlie Lee tweet, but he tends to be a little bit ominous in the way he phrases things. Right. But tell me about your role in kind of fleshing out prices, charts, and that specific prediction.
Yeah, we'll do that. So let's first start with Bitcoin, right? And so, you know, I always invested in traditional markets like the Apples, the AMDs, NVIDIAs, or whatever, right? I traded stocks. And then when I got into Bitcoin, one of the things that really opened my mind was seeing the logarithmic chart of Bitcoin. Okay. And that was even before, it hit 10,000. I saw that chart and it opened my mind to realizing the historical trends of price. Okay. And if you haven't seen so anybody that I ever show about Bitcoin and Litecoin, et cetera, I show them that chart because it's very important. It shows the network adoption. It shows the adoption of price of Bitcoin. And so understanding that, then you can start to, you can start to see these adoption waves, okay, which the adoption waves I'll call cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And the cycles have always been post-halving, like 9 months or later. And they're every 4 years, right? So 13 was the November 13 was the top. Fast forward 4 years, December 2017 was the top.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Fast forward 4 years, November 21 was the top for Bitcoin, right? Fast forward 4 years, 2025 could be a top, right? There's these cycles and these waves. And so then you start comparing. And so TradingView is the tool that I use every day. You can get a free account or you can pay like a premium. Free account works too. And you can compare Bitcoin versus Litecoin, right? And you start to see, if you do like a trading pair called the LTC BTC pair, where you're comparing like Litecoin priced in Bitcoin terms, you can kind of see that it was an oscillator, has been an oscillator. I mean, there's cycles, okay? Mm-hmm. In Dogecoin was a very good oscillator compared to Bitcoin, meaning there's like highs and lows, and they happen on some frequency. And then Dogecoin leveled up to a higher level in 21. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about how that happened too a little bit later if we can. We'll come back to that. But so with Litecoin's price, it has the same supply distribution as Bitcoin with the 4-year halvings, right? Mm-hmm. And if demand is the same or more, then price could do very similar things to what Bitcoin's done, okay? And you could do something like BTC4, where you take the market cap of Bitcoin and divide it by 4, because the supply is around 4, the difference. And you can overlay that on Litecoin's price, and they're pretty similar. During the peaks, it came up and touched that value. So what I'm saying is that it's very similar to Bitcoin's, but in the last cycle, it didn't reach up quite as high. And there's some technical analysis that you could say about that, because there's a lot of trade. So Litecoin has a lot of traders. Mm-hmm. I would argue, compared to its market cap, it's heavily traded, right? I mean, people want to trade Litecoin. Mm-hmm. And so you can see the market in 21, a lot of profit was taken at around 400, which is the all-time high. It couldn't quite recover. I think there was some forced selling due to the bankruptcies of those companies like Celsius, the Voyagers, the BlockFis. I think somebody or multiple entities dumped a lot of it and dropped Litecoin down probably way lower than it should have been. And I have charts that can show that. So then you got to realize all I think about is Litecoin. I think about Bitcoin and Dogecoin, but I've been modeling these things from an engineering perspective. And I kind of stumbled upon something I'm calling the network value model. Okay. And it comes loosely from Metcalfe's law, but it's really simple. I'm a simple person. All it does is look at the number of transactions, new addresses, transactional volume of Litecoin compared to Bitcoin. It's just a ratio. So if like 50% of, there's 50% of total addresses versus Bitcoin, you would just take 50% of Bitcoin price. Okay. It's really simple. Mm-hmm. Now you take all of those network stats and then you compare them against Bitcoin. That network fair value is around like $2,000. Mm. And we're in a bear market, coming out of a bear market, right? Yeah. And that's, so what I'm saying is Litecoin's fair value, in my mind, network value is around 2,000 and Bitcoin's at 30,000. And if you go back to like the Bitcoin chart, the waves and whatnot, and if we expect Bitcoin to reach a new all-time high, maybe next year, and then a bull market in 25, maybe 26, or even earlier, that network value for Litecoin would also increase. And I would argue that it would increase even more because Bitcoin is constrained with the 500,000 transactions per day. Mm-hmm. And that fee will rise. And we've already seen the fees rise on Bitcoin in May due to ordinals. And Litecoin is a perfect substitute for Bitcoin. Yes. And so it only makes sense. You're seeing with BitPay. BitPay is a proven example, right? You could potentially see more use of Litecoin because its fees are lower, has more throughput. It's faster. Mm-hmm. It has a better user experience than Bitcoin. And so I would expect the network value to actually increase even higher. And I have data that shows that early this year, some of those metrics actually surpass Bitcoin, meaning its network value is higher than Bitcoin. And what would that mean? Let's say in 4 or 5 years, we have to talk about this, because in 4 or 5 years, what if Litecoin's network value is higher than Bitcoin?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What does that mean? It means this. It means that Litecoin's market cap could be higher than Bitcoin's market cap. And I know people don't want to hear that, because everyone says, "Oh, my altcoin can replace Bitcoin."
Right.
But what I'm saying though is that if there was one network that could do that, it is Litecoin.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think in this bear market, and I talked a little bit with Luke about this, there's tremendous growth right now. And it's like the price is really very stable, which, by the way, stability is not a bad thing.
Good. It actually,
it's not wildly swinging all over the place, so it's a very stable coin. However, I do believe we're going to see a lot higher USD termed Litecoin in the future. I just think it's inevitable. But I'm interested in your opinion. You've done your due diligence. You've built your models. You have things you've fleshed out. And I'm grateful that you shared these things with us. And you said it's on TradingView?
Yeah, so on TradingView, you can actually, I have a community script on there. You can view it's called Master Litecoin Network Value Model. And I even have one for the LTC BTC pair. Yeah, and I've also modeled other networks too, right? So it's not just Litecoin I've modeled Dogecoin. And so back to the Dogecoin thing where 21, where the price leveled up to like a newer like range against Bitcoin, it sucked right up to that network value, right? So it means the model there's something behind the model. I've modeled it for like Ethereum. I've modeled it for Matic. The modeling on like an XRP, I've modeled on XRP, the modeling on like an Algorand, like a Solana, the model the range is so weird. It's not a tight, consistent range. What it kind of leads me, I'm not saying, I don't know the answer, but I don't trust the model, because the range is so, like, there's so many transactions on like Solana versus like how much transactional volume there is like in US dollar, because the fees are so low. Maybe it's spam or whatever, and they have like a voting consensus model. Same with XRP. Like there's very little new addresses, but it has kind of like a high transactional volume. So, the model, but what I'm trying to get at though is like the model for like a Litecoin, a Dogecoin, Ethereum, a Matic, the model looks good. Like the data, they kind of all jive, right? And then, so you look at like a Matic, when I look at Matic, I look at Link network value, they're overpriced, right? And what I've been seeing is that price has been going down, right? And so you start looking at the network value of these other models, and all this data has been relatively new. I've only seen this data since November of 21. 21, November 20. No, sorry, November 22. We're in 23. So November 22 is when I first stumbled upon this. I published like an article on looking at Litecoin around Thanksgiving, shared the data. And so I think as more individuals, more institutions start actually looking at network data, like Raul Paul, he does that with I can't think of his Real Vision, right? Real Vision. He looks at network value models. He hasn't done Litecoin yet, but I think more people are going to start waking up to it.
They will, yeah.
It's just too obvious not to. And then the other thing so when you start comparing like Litecoin versus Bitcoin and projecting price down the road, I will say this though, that Dogecoin was undervalued from its network value model for I think 8 years.
Wow.
So Litecoin's undervalued. It's been really undervalued since like 21. How long can it stay undervalued? It could be 8 years.
Yeah,
I don't know.
8 years.
But I do know this is that
it's used more than ever.
Well, that too. But I'll say this though: when it does move, Litecoin has made its move in like 80 days, right? So and that's one of the reasons why I'm so forceful with my price predictions, is because you could just wake up one day and it's like, oh my gosh, there it goes.
Yeah.
And the reason I kind of wanted to share this with people is because when I first learned about Bitcoin early on, like in 2011 or 2012, whenever it was, from a coworker, I dismissed it.
Oh yes.
I was like, there's no way you can have money on the internet. And I ignored it. And I wish he would have like shook me and been like, hey man, no, I'm serious. Just take a little bit of time, read the white paper, try and just spend 2 weeks and try and disprove it. Okay. If you can disprove it in 2 weeks, then fine.
Yeah.
So I want to be the friend that's shared it with people.
Yeah. We can all say that you're doing your due diligence and you are indeed sharing sharing with people if they're willing to listen and take a look at what you're saying. I don't think I've seen a more prolific Twitterer. I'm still using Twitter. Sorry, it's glued to my tongue. We'll find new language for the X app in the future, but your volume is very heavy in terms of content that you published just on the Twitter platform, for example, not to mention your models and other things on Look into Litecoin. You alluded to this the other day. I don't know if we can get anything from you here, but I'll invite you to share. You did a poll saying, what are you interested in hearing me thread about? And one of them was why Litecoin in 2023 may look like Bitcoin in 2015. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah. I was actually hoping to do that today for the halving, but I didn't get it finished.
Well, today's the halving day. We're doing it, but the day's not through.
So you're actually one of my examples. Here's why. We'll kind of go through it. So the reason I think that Litecoin is around in 2015 Bitcoin, one is the market cap will be the same. Mm-hmm. Okay, pretty simple. Check that box. The next thing you start looking at total addresses, right? So total addresses right around 2015. Okay. Then you start looking at I don't know if I can't remember if transactional volume might be a little bit. Transactional volume might be a little bit higher. I think it's probably more like a 2017. So it's really pushing its weight. When I say that, there's a couple other metrics. So the network metrics look like a 2015, 2016, just a network. If you were to compare the two, to compare to Bitcoin, okay. Then you start looking at companies, looking at podcasts, for example, right? So let's look at podcasts. So there's only 2 really new Litecoin podcasts. I think you're pretty much the consistent one right now. And then we have Grant over at Litecoin Underground. He kind of does a little bit different. He more holds a community spaces every week. He's been very consistent with that. You're more of a traditional podcast, which is what I like to see. There in 20, I didn't really start listening to podcasts until maybe 2018, right? And I'm sure they were out there, but so what I'm trying to say is that I feel like the culture, the community is still pretty early to a Bitcoin in 2015, 2016, right? You don't have the books written, right? So I'm writing a book. Is it going to be as well written as the Bitcoin standard? Probably not, but I'll try and do my best.
That's
but
terrific.
we might have a book that comes out that is a Litecoin standard or a Litecoin, Dogecoin, Bitcoin, Nakamoto standard, and I think which would reflect actually what's occurring and not this Bitcoin only stuff that they've been pushing for a while, which isn't the case.
Yeah.
So we don't really have the media, and then you look at companies, right? So companies just started adding Litecoin, some of them like BitPlay, for example, and others. And you can maybe argue that you're starting to see some companies thinking about maybe Litecoin only or a Litecoin, Dogecoin kind of theme, and so those are the reasons why. Oh, and the other fascinating thing is that if you were to compare Bitcoin's market cap structure in 2015, it looks very similar to Litecoin's right now.
Yeah.
And if you were to draw project the same fractal or the same move up to 2017, it gets you to a number that most people can't realize how quickly it can happen, and it could happen, right? And so some of the reason I project that is because I want people to be aware of that this asset can do that. It can.
I would
Will
agree
it?
with I would agree with you. I think that's a tremendous case, and I do think Litecoin, while it's over 11 years old, um, it's 12 this. Mix up my notes. 12 this October, correct? It'll be
Yeah.
which, by the way, there was going to be a cruise with the foundation. Charlie will be there. You may be there. I
Yeah.
unfortunately will not be in attendance as of this point, but we're celebrating. But anyway, Litecoin in that sense has already come of age, but the
Yeah.
community hasn't. And where we're going, it's going to keep building and building and building, and that's exciting. And again, we've been consistent and perpetual despite ups and downs in markets. And again, if we can, just praise the Litecoin network itself, which is where all this is based in, all this talk is
Yeah.
around that asset,
Yeah.
that ecosystem. It's never been down, and
Right.
no other chain can claim that. So that's terrific. I do want to talk about maybe some. I would think you're a proponent of holding Litecoin, the individual or the company, the organization, whatever, holding actual Litecoin rather than derivative Litecoin or
Correct.
pools of.
Yeah.
However, these things do exist. There's LTCN. Yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned the other day, which I did look up, the Coinbase LTC Perp.
Yeah.
There's
Futures
some
for,
other vehicles
yeah.
for Litecoin as well, which are coming to play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So, like, I'll be a little bit open here. My position mainly is in native Litecoin. I have a self-directed IRA I set up that I did own Bitcoin in it, but I traded my Bitcoin for Litecoin. And so, if you have like a retirement account or an account where you just have access to like traditional equity stocks like that, you can get exposure to Litecoin in the Litecoin Grayscale Trust that is trading at a discount. You're gonna have to figure out why there's a discount on your own as an investor. You can go to Grayscale Litecoin Trust, the website, and you can actually see the discount. When I say discount, what it means by that is they've issued so many stocks, right? Stocks, and then each stock is essentially backed by some Litecoin that they hold. Okay, so the amount of Litecoin that they hold per share is more than the price of it. So there's a discount. I think it's like maybe, I don't know, 30% today or something. I'm not sure. You'll have to go look at that. So there's exposure for that. And then it's similar to the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, the GBTC. It's the same kind of it's the same product, right? It just has a different asset. And if you haven't heard, BlackRock, Fidelity, ARK, VanEck, etc., Valkyrie, they all submitted Bitcoin spot ETF approvals to the SEC. Okay, and those are going to come due like in September, a month from now, in the next couple, even I think through April. So it wouldn't be of a surprise to see potentially those get approved, especially with BlackRock's approval rate, like approval percentage. They've gotten like all the ones they've approved out of like 570 of them, right? Maybe like with the exception of one. So the success rate for them is pretty high. So we should see that. We should have already seen that in ETF years ago, but we haven't. So what I'm trying to say though is that I would fully expect a Litecoin ETF, right? Maybe you'd have to see futures first. I'm not sure. Maybe the market cap needs to be a little bit bigger potentially, but it should come, right? You have an Ethereum. They just applied for Ethereum futures or trusts, I think, ETFs recently, maybe in the last couple of days. So you would expect to see that. And if that does happen, the Litecoin Grayscale Trust could potentially roll over into an ETF. And at that point, the discount would go away like instantly, right? Because you're able to redeem the share for the Litecoin that's backing it. And the price would be arbitraged and it would equal fair value like very quickly, right? Who knows how long that takes? It may take a while. The other thing is there also is a Bitwise is a portfolio that you can invest in, and it has like 0.9% Litecoin.
Okay.
I believe those are the only two where you can get some exposure to Litecoin. But the Grayscale one's like 100%. And I own like a very small amount of that just because I'm pretty much all into Litecoin, natively. So
Agreed. And I did access a tiny portion for disclosure as well. Again, we're educational here. We don't give it financial advice. Um, but it was what attracted me to it is because I kind of ran the numbers that are published and the representation per share, and it just didn't make sense in terms of the current market valuation. It was very asymmetric in my opinion. So I said, well, let's see what happens. So and we'll see what happens. But yes, Litecoin,
Even today, it's
native Litecoin, I would agree is what we really are after. That's the difference, not these funds and alternate forms of trading
yeah,
vehicles.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the fair value today is around $8, and it's trading at $5.
Yeah, so there you go. There's some disparity there. I want to talk before we land the plane. We got a little bit of time yet, but I'm going to ask some of my my directional questions here. I want to talk about you personally, just kind of some of your personal projects, and we'll just lead with what brought you into Litecoin. How was Master LTC BTC made?
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, so the I was originally anonymous on Twitter. My handle was like XDI. I literally just typed. I went anonymous. And the reason I went anonymous was from Jameson Lopp. If you follow Jameson Lopp, he'll make you want to go anonymous. So I was anonymous for a while, and I was still anonymous. And then I changed the name because I started learning about like trying to be like more of an influence on Twitter,
Mhm.
and the Twitter handle just was terrible.
Master
Because I lived,
BTC LTC?
no. Before that, it was no.
Okay.
Before that, it was like XTDIS and KEFE. It was just I literally just typed on my computer
Yeah, it's just
random.
like an alphanumeric
Yeah, because
string.
I was making a junk Twitter. It was December 2017 when I went anonymous.
Yeah.
And so then later on, I started wanting like, well, I can maybe start growing my account a little bit. So I changed the name to Master BTC LTC, and the name Master came from my whole goal was to master. So Andre Antonopoulos wrote Mastering Bitcoin, and he
Mm-hmm.
wrote Mastering Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I want to master Litecoin.
Good
Well, and Bitcoin.
call.
So the name was Master. I think it started out Mastering BTC LTC was like my name, and then the Twitter handle was at Master BTC LTC. Yeah,
You didn't have your picture there till maybe a little bit over a year ago, and Shan
that's
wasn't
correct.
listed. So
Yeah,
what caused you to de-anonymize?
yeah, yeah. So because I suck at being anonymous, I had a couple people DM me, and they're like, "I know who you are." I'm like, "Okay, how do you know that?" And they're like, "Well, it's pretty easy." I said, "Yeah, okay." It's hard to stay anonymous.
It is.
And so I was like, well, whatever. Like, I mean, if people can find me, they can find me.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's like, I'm not sophisticated enough to try and, hide.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and at some point, it's like, well, I started realizing like how, at first it was like, this is more of like an investment, like a trade. With Bitcoin and Litecoin, maybe like just make a bunch of money and walk away. But what you're realizing though is that we're actually building the future of money, and, people don't. That's why I tweet so much about it. Is because people don't realize the potential impact for society, financially, economically, and for a better system for the people on Earth. Right? If everyone has a fair monetary system that can't be debased really easily, it just works really well. It's kind of like it's not constrained to like a country, and
It's
and
also
I
more moral.
yeah, exactly. It totally is because you're not debasing the currency, and what we found is like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we see this huge wealth gap. Like you have to be very sophisticated in this system, the current system now, to benefit from it, right? So you're seeing like the have-nots, the people who just live paycheck to paycheck. They don't invest. They're not saving. They don't own equity in a business. They're going to get left behind, right? And that's because in this system, it's a debt system. So they want you to take on debt. They want you to, invest capital. And, a lot of like normal day people, they just want to raise a family, go to work, get paid, and have fun. They don't all want to be sophisticated investors, right? Which is, I'm probably in the more sophisticated bucket, obviously, but everybody else, they don't have time for that, or they're not interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
If you just have like a fair monetary system, like a Bitcoin or a Litecoin, you can just hold your money in that. For now as a store of value, it's simple. You don't got to like flip a house
Right.
or it's just a pretty simple way to save money potentially. And I think that people are not looking hard enough at Bitcoin, and maybe we could segue into this, because I don't think people are realizing this next presidential election, how important it will be, because nearly all these candidates, maybe except Joe Biden, is pro Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like all of them, every one of them.
Which is positive, because the current administration is actually, I feel, a bit chilling in terms of we haven't seen a lot of good come out of this late under the and I'm not talking about how you need to vote. That's not the point of this, but there were folks under the former administration which were much more friendly to cryptocurrency. Even, again, this could be murk for some other people because they want to be completely independent as a system versus using the standard system. But what I'm saying, they had conversation with banks and how do we integrate crypto? How do we custody it? Whether or not that's the ideal, at least there's conversations about how do we see what exists, how do we incorporate it and not quash it? When lately it's just been more a bunch of gray and the SEC stuff, and it's been very ugly and it's chilling, which is why everything, I believe, is doing kind of that.
Sure.
So I do think it's very important, the regulators or the elected officials, and what is their approach to crypto,
mm-hmm.
or meaning monetary crypto, not even just the whole space. Although Freedom would suggest you can have all your other casino tokens, but as a monetary system, a Bitcoin or a Litecoin, what is their approach to that?
Yeah, we're seeing that regulation starting to come through now. We're seeing like bills. There's the Lummis bill about digital currencies. And then you're also seeing like a stable coin bill, I think, kind of getting pushed through. So there's some bills that are coming through Congress right now that are pro this space, right? I mean, they all know. When you look at like Janet Yellen, is that her name?
Yeah,
Yellen, Secretary Treasury. She literally talked about Satoshi Nakamoto in the white paper. Like, she gave a speech on it, right? So the government knows. They know all this. They know all this. Why? Because they're thinking about a central bank digital currency, because maybe that's like a way to compete with these assets or provide a different, like I said, it's all an experiment. We don't know, particularly, right? So they're all trying to think about this. But when you kind of like go back to the candidates, right, on both sides, you have this. So like we could look at like Robert
F. Kennedy Jr. Yeah.
Right. So he's a Democrat. He kind of popped out of nowhere. He's a Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
On the Democrat side, right? So that's pretty cool.
It is.
And then you look at the Republicans, and all the Republicans are stacked pro Bitcoin. I mean, all of them. You got like Vivek Ramaswamy. You have like Ron DeSantis. You have who else is running? You have Trump. So Trump has never really said anything good about Bitcoin.
Yet while he was administrative,
office,
it was a pretty good environment, to be fair.
Here's the thing, though. What did he launch? He launched NFTs on Polygon.
Okay. Trump did?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some entity under him, but yeah, it's Trump related. And then
that's hilarious. Didn't know that.
His wife made NFTs, and then one of his sons was on like BitBoy talking about crypto.
Oh wow.
I mean, so they all know. And then you got like an Andrew Yang from the Forward Party. He's pro Bitcoin.
He's pro Bitcoin.
Yeah, he met with Charlie Lee, so he's got to be pro Litecoin too, obviously. And then, you even have the mayor of Miami, Mayor Suarez. He's pro Bitcoin. And
I know the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, is also very pro.
Bitcoin. So Abbott, and then like Senator Ted Cruz, those guys are both pro Bitcoin. And then you look at Then you look at like the Libertarian Party, and you have that Joe Jorgensen. She's
Yes.
pro Bitcoin, pro Litecoin, pro crypto.
Yeah.
Um, is there anybody else that's running that's not? I mean,
It's arrived. You have to wrestle with this. It's how do you respond to it, which is important.
yeah. And so I think, most everyday Americans and people throughout the world, they may not really understand this yet because we're in this space and we're, always looking at this. Like when we have the debates coming up, it could potentially come up, right? And it's going to be like, what are they going to ask? Like they might ask like, what's a central bank digital currency?
That's
What's
a
your stance on it?
very important question.
And they're going to ask, what's your stance? And they're going to probably say, we are not for a central bank digital currency. Okay. And what does that mean? Then we're going to use I'll say public because it's like kind of private, but like money outside of the government would mean like a Bitcoin, a Litecoin, etc. And that can happen very quickly. I mean, we could have a pro Bitcoin president in 2025, in office.
I mean, if it was treated as foreign exchange, that would be the first solution. It would be taxless.
Yeah.
Every movement would be inconsequential with taxes.
Yeah.
We don't get taxed on trading yen or yuan. Yeah. I mean, why are we taxed on Litecoin and Bitcoin? Personal opinion. Yeah. That would be a very bright day if we see that. Very bright day.
Yeah. That's what needs to happen. It needs, at least the under $600 or whatever they're trying to push through. I think Lummis's bill would have that under 600.
Yeah.
If you made a transaction, it would be non-taxable. That'd be great.
It would be great. I'm going to move on here. We're going to land it with this one, Shan. Okay. It upsets me because I'm enjoying this and I feel like we could continue. But I'm going to have to end the feed here in a few minutes. But I do thank you for coming on. So let's kind of end with, you run Look Into Litecoin. To a degree, you're involved with the Lightburst. There's ordinals, there's LRC20 tokens. What's exciting you in the space? What are you doing in the space? And what kind of thoughts do you want to leave us with today?
Sure. I think the most exciting thing is just seeing adoption. I want to be able to use Litecoin as money, right? And so that's what I'm most excited about. And then the biggest thing is really MWeb adoption. So MWeb is a new feature that was released about a year ago. It's only available on like Litecoin client, the Litecoin core, which you got to download on your computer. Most people don't do that. It's not widely available in like mobile wallets or like a Ledger or a Treasure. So seeing that tech be rolled out and more widely adopted would be really cool. And the reason for that is privacy, right? So if you have if you have your Litecoin using MWeb, the amount in those wallets is private, right? So you can't see how much money I have, and that's important for our financial system. Privacy is very important. It's very critical, very important. You can even see like central bank digital currencies that are talking. The EU was talking about it would have privacy, right? So it's very important that we have privacy with our money. Litecoin is leading the way with privacy. Other like small exciting things. Obviously, Look Into Litecoin is a good resource. The reason I created that was there's only like a lot of places that are just Bitcoin only. Nobody really writes about Litecoin. And so there was an opportunity to start publishing Litecoin specific articles. It's just a great way to learn about Litecoin too, right? I don't know if you've published on there yet, but other folks in the community have been. It's like an open. Anybody who wants to really publish can publish there.
It's terrific, and admittedly, there is more Litecoin current content curated and written on your platform than mine. Not to diminish 84 million, we have a place in the world, but I love what you're doing, and you're putting a lot of content out, and it's terrific. I recommend everybody look into Litecoin.com and Look Into Litecoin.
Yeah, and then I ran a business for several years, Crypto Keys. We put that on hold actually like a week ago. Just the bear market, not a lot of sales. We have a lot of competition, but it's a really good product. It's a nice way to back up your private keys with metal. And I still use them. They're great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what I'm excited about mainly is your channel. I'm excited to see your podcast take off. I want to see you have more guests in the future. yeah, so I thank you for the opportunity and look forward to doing more with you.
Well, here, we'd love to have you back and appreciate the exhortation. You're always an encouragement. Just a reminder to follow Shan at Master BTC LTC. I believe he has a super subscription option as well. Shan, it's been a pleasure. We would love to have you back on the show. With that, we'll end it. Just a reminder that this will be available on 84million.com/podcast. It's going to be on all your major platforms or streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple, et cetera, as well as YouTube. So the resource would be 84million.com/podcast, and subscribe on your favorite platforms there. So with that being said, we're going to leave it at that today. Everybody take care. Happy Halving Day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kyle. See ya.